She was glorified as the goddess of eternal youth and beauty, compared to the Virgin Mary, and named the Virgin Queen. 45 years of her rule remained in history as the Elizabethan era. It was a century of absolutism, the invincible armada, defeat and prosperity of English Renaissance culture. Elizabeth I Tudor was born on September 7, 1533, to King Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn. 4 years later, the king executed her mother, and the princess was proclaimed a bastard. Nevertheless, before his death, her father called her as one of the potential successors of the throne after her brother Edward and her sister Mary. Though her right to the throne was restored, Elizabeth had to fear for her life from her childhood. It taught her to be secretive, prudent, and cunning. In 1553, her consanguineous sister, Mary I Tudor, a zealous Catholic, became the queen. She was nicknamed Bloody Mary because of her cruelty. Mary accused her sister of participation in a conspiracy and imprisoned her in the Tower for 2 months, where Elizabeth was subjected to interrogations. Then she was kept under supervision in Woodstock for 1 year. To save her life, Elizabeth, who was brought up as a Protestant, had to stick to Catholic rituals and practices. In 1558, the childless Mary died, and the throne was succeeded by Elizabeth. On January 16, 1559, Elizabeth was crowned at the Westminster Abbey. She had already proved that she possessed her father's obstinacy and her mother's courage. Contemporaries wrote about her. She entered the Whitehall not as a shy schoolgirl, but as a sober politician and a wise player. The first step of the new queen was the restoration of the Church of England, an independent church within the boundaries of Protestantism. At that time, the new symbol of faith, a summary of Christian dogmata, was worked out. Elizabeth strived for keeping the peace between her subjects, the Catholics and the Protestants. However, the Catholics put forward a new pretender to the English throne, the Scottish Queen, Mary Stuart. The confrontation between the two queens lasted for almost 30 years as intrigues, plots, and revolts. To keep her authority, Elizabeth surrounded herself with the most devoted and educated people, such as the First Minister William Cecil, the Minister of Finance Thomas Gresham, and the head of espionage network Walsingham. Elizabeth constantly displayed her care for the citizens. "You would have a greater sovereign, but you'd never have a more caring one," she liked to repeat. Her favorite symbol was a pelican tearing pieces of flesh off its own chest in order to feed its hungry chicks. Deliberately refusing to marry, she declared that she was engaged to the nation. But it never prevented her from carrying on marriage negotiations with Catholics and even with the Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible. Queen of England attracted the skillful artisans to the country. She encouraged the setting up of new manufactures and trading companies. During her reign, the first coins started to be minted in a fair way. The first stock exchange was founded, and the State Committee on the Poor, which main principles are still valid, was established. In the second half of the 16th century, England led an undeclared sea war for the Spanish colonies in the New World. Queen Elizabeth encouraged piracy in the Atlantic and was a party to many piracy expeditions. She graced the ship of the famous sea pirate Francis Drake by her presence. When in 1580 he returned from the second round-the-world trip accompanied with piracy strikes, the Queen promoted Drake to the rank of knight. After Elizabeth managed to deal with her main rival Mary Stuart and her adherents, the Pope openly called the Catholics to the war with England. In 1588, the Spanish fleet of Philip II, so-called Invincible Armada, left for the British Isles. In the moment of danger, Elizabeth swore to her soldiers to perish together in the battle. The victory over Armada brought her the fame of the new mistress of the seas and the leader of all European Protestants. The Queen of England was highly educated. She spoke 8 languages, wrote poetry, was good at playing music, and had a quick wit. She was refined, valued literature, and patronized theater. The Elizabethan Golden Age of English culture gave to the world William Shakespeare, Edmund Spenser, and Francis Bacon. Elizabeth I Tudor died on March 24, 1603. To unite England with Scotland under authority of the one monarch, Elizabeth appointed before her death her successor Jacob, the son of decapitated upon her verdict Mary Stuart. The Queen of England, Elizabeth I Tudor, was buried in the chapel of Henry VII of the Westminster Abbey, and the day of her accession, November 17th, became the national holiday and was celebrated up to the 18th century as the triumph of Protestantism and the birthday of the nation.